The laws presently do not stop a school from raising the fee hike to whatever level.
So why do you think the schools are charging so high?
Up to them and up to the parents.
Why is it that there's different fee for different children in the same class? I want to ask, are the facilities that the school providing really that high?
Laws state that it has to be a not-for-profit institution, but the reality of it, everybody knows, including the parents, the government, the school managements. You have schools which have been sold for 1,500, 1,700 crores, and education sector is the hot cake for a lot of private equity investment. A company owned by George Soros has invested in Hyderabad-based schools. So what are we talking of? Not-for-profit, sorry, it's that. You having about 40, 50 crores lying with you and you telling you don't have enough money to pay high salaries for teachers? That's not done. Even at present real estate prices, you should be able to provide a school which will give you all that at around lakh and a half price point. That the parents have, they have no rights to the school. What rights do they have?
How much is right to education going to actually get implemented in schools?
Where I have written that it is perhaps one of the worst legislations. The government says it will reimburse. But how much is the government reimburse? 20,000, 16,000. That too after 2 or 3 years wait. So who's going to foot the subsidy bill for this? You think the school is going to do it? It's the remaining 75% of the parents who will have to do it. The government had made a statement from the floor of the state legislature that within a few months they're going to come out with the legislation. So that's 2017, we are sitting in 2025 now. So to give you some perspective.
Right.
Previous Chief Minister KCR said that we are not going to implement this aspect of the Act in Telangana. And that's not implemented yet.
Welcome to Yellow Slate, India's top school search engine. Today we are tackling a topic that's on every parent's mind: why school fees keep going up. Joining us today is Ashish, founder of Indic International School in Hyderabad. Not only has he founded his own school, but he's also been actively involved in Hyderabad School Parent Association, which is why we believe he's the perfect person to help us understand the whole school fee structure. Hello, Mr. Ashish.
Hi.
With the kind of fee structures that are going forward, I feel education is going to be so expensive that a middle class family have to give up on things or save up, and it's going to get difficult for them.
Yes.
Do you think the government has to step in and do something about it?
There is a definite need for regulation. Okay. But there is a little more change in perspective on this from my side. Having seen that as a parent and now having seen the other side of as a school management also. Regulation is definitely required. But in terms of the nature of regulation, there's been some evolution, and that's what I think I'll put out. Now, my first thing, I don't know if the government will ever do it, but first thing is that schools are specified as not-for-profit sector. And by doing so, you're making avenues for getting the schools to make even more profit, because nothing is under the radar now. Nothing is in the radar now. Okay.
Why? How can that happen?
See, you're saying not for profit. Schools are getting sold for 1,500, 1,700 crores. Where is that coming from? What's the government doing?
Where are they?
It's a large subject. We'll get to that sometime else. But by saying that you cannot make profits, you're not giving scope to them to make profits the legal way. So then, not that they're making profits illegally, but there are loopholes in law which are exploited, which everybody on the face of the earth knows, including the government, officials, politicians, parents, and the managements. But everybody is making a profit. You have to make schools for profit legally. And then the advantages that will come out is that everything will be out in the open. Let's say I'm a registered company. My balance sheets will be out there with Ministry of Corporate Affairs. You will have transparency. If it's made transparent, then I'll have to give it to the government every year. Otherwise, next year I will not be able to file my returns.
Like an income tax.
Absolutely. So make it for profit legally. And there are so many restrictions on who can start a school, where you can start a school, what all you need to have. If you do away with that, there'll be so many more people who will come in and start schools. In the long term, mushrooming of the schools and market forces, as is generally called in economics, is a definite way to put some kind of a break on fee regulation or some kind of a break on fee hikes. Again, if I can give an instance of our area, we started 2 years back. This year, 5 new schools are opening up. Okay. Even well-established brands having more than 100, 150 schools across India. Now they are keeping their fees perhaps at a level little lesser than our fees also, right? So we'll stick with that. But the important point to note there is that the market forces also will act in bringing in this regulation. That said, once you make it for profit and you let the market forces act, then you can bring in a lot of business regulation on it. The only regulation which is there is with the boards, and they look at academics, they look at exams. They don't look at other aspects. That regulation can come in if you classify it as a business and bring in the regular business regulation on it. That's what I would like to believe is a probable solution. Whether the government will do it, I don't think. But if you ask for a proper solution, I think that is certainly one way forward for this sector.
State or central government do not have a regulation act on the fee structure. Is that true?
Largely right, because there are some acts, but they are toothless.
Okay.
And effectively, on ground, there's actually not much regulation on fees or any other aspect of the school other than exams and whatever regulation the boards do in terms of CBSE or the state boards. Besides that, there's no real regulation on the fee. It says the laws state that it has to be a not-for-profit institution, but the reality of it, everybody knows, including the parents, the government, the school managements. You have schools which have been sold for 1,500, 1,700 crores, and education sector is a hot cake for a lot of private equity investment. A company owned by George Soros has invested in Hyderabad-based schools. So what are we talking of? Not for profit? Sorry, it's not. It remains only on paper. Otherwise, it's all, everybody knows, the government, including the government, they know it that it's for profit.
So when we hear Mr. Bura Venkateshwaram is the Principal Secretary of Education. So he recently came up with a statement telling that he's going to get a regulation act which would restrict private schools from charging anything between only 10 and 30% increase in the fee structure. How do you see this act? Is it going to happen or is it still just in papers?
I'll tell you, I was a parent activist earlier, and I've seen this in Hyderabad from 2008, and now 14, it's about 16 years. We've had various governments making various statements. We've had government GOs issued. We've fought cases in court, and nothing has come of it. There are effects, you could say, but these are all indirect effects. But if you speak from the government perspective, nothing really comes out from it. Well, if the present government is making a statement, who am I to dismiss it? Who am I to dismiss their intention? But looking at hindsight and what experience we've had, I would be skeptical. That's what I would like to say. Because, when I was a part of HSPA, Hyderabad Schools Parents Association, now I'm running a school myself. So many people find it very interesting. But when I was there, 2016 or 17, I think the then government had made a statement from the floor of the state legislature that within a few months they're going to come out with the legislation. So that's 2017. We are sitting in 2025 now. So to give you some perspective.
Right. So saying that we cannot say nothing will happen, but
That's why I said, see, looking at all this, I'm skeptical. But if the government says that it's going to come out with, who am I to doubt or the intentions or raise a question mark on it? But of course, regulation is a very large term. And if you say 10 to 30%, then if schools can increase by 30%, then what regulation is it? Right? So there are various metrics to it. And we'll have to look into a lot of intricacies before you get into what kind of regulation is required and what kind of regulation will be effective.
When the school gives us a list, it says tuition fee, then it comes transportation, then food. So when we're talking about hike, is other schools charging on the tuition fee?
So that's a great question you brought up. Let me give you an instance.
Yes.
So what happened in COVID was that the government came up with a GO saying that because of COVID and because of all these issues, there shouldn't be any fee hike in the schools. So school said, okay, fee hike not done. If it was 2 lakhs, it continues at 2 lakh. Transport, if it was 30, it has gone to 60. So the rules that they had was that this is not fees, this is a facilitation or this is a service charge. So you would find an article that I wrote. You can Google for it. It's there on a News Meter website. If ever the government comes out with a fee regulation act, what aspects it should necessarily have for it to be effective. And in that, the first aspect I wrote is that you need to define what fee is. Otherwise, you know that these things will happen. So there's a simple definition for what a fee is. All amounts paid by a parent to a school should be regarded as fees. All amounts paid by a parent, be it for books, stationery, which is not allowed for the schools to be sold in the schools, which I believe is a very stupid rule, which should be done away with. But nonetheless, a rule is a rule. All amounts paid by parents to the school should be treated as fees. Be it for transport, be it for food, be it for tuition, be it for library, be it for annual day, it should be there, and that should be the base which should be set. A lot of people might not know, but Andhra Pradesh government was also trying to come up with a Fee Regulation Act. They did come up with something which did not have much teeth, but that draft had come to me through some friends who happened to be there. And in that act, I changed the definition and told them that, no, you please get this fee definition changed. So if anything, we can take some credit that, it is our definition which got accepted by the Andhra Pradesh government.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah.
When the school is going to say it's increased only 10%
Yeah.
or 15%.
Yeah.
But I see when I sit with my calculator for 100, it is not 115. It is definitely 140. So
See,
how do I try, as a parent,
see,
how do I understand it?
I don't know if other school managements will like what I'm going to say.
Oh, please.
Because this is again something at least we educate all our parents in our school. Now, like we are saying, we'll keep the fee high to 10%. I think most other schools, if not all, most others are also saying they'll do 10%. But when you sit with your calculators, it was turning out to be more.
Exactly.
How and why?
Yes.
I'll give you the secret. Now, there's something which we call a slab system. So let's assume your child is studying in PP2 right now, going to grade 1 next year. PP2, the fees that you're paying in the current year is 1 lakh, let's assume, a ballpark figure. And the PP1 fees this year is 1 lakh 30. So when you talk of fee hike of 10% next year, 10% on what base? Of what you paid this year in PP2 or what other students paid for grade 1 this year? It is 10% on 1 lakh or 10% with 1 lakh fee for PP2 or 10% on 1 lakh 30, which is the fee for grade 1.
Yes.
What most other schools do is 10% on grade 1, 1 lakh 30. So this becomes 143 next year, while on paper for the school, it continues to be 10% fee hike. For the parent, it becomes a 43% hike. So Tirupati Rao gave this recommendation. I made this point to him in writing. I said, sir, we should be okay with a 10% hike, but on what? You need to make the base clear.
So now we're talking about fee. Why is it that there's different fee for different children in the same class? Let's say my daughter is joined last year and I'm paying 1 lakh.
Yeah, correct.
This year, 150 or 130.
Yeah.
But this year, the new student who's joining in along with her, the new person has to pay 2 lakhs, which is a little higher than the old student.
Correct.
Is that intentionally done by schools?
Yeah, see, let's say in our case also. Now, why it will happen is, now we've given a commitment to you that your fees is not going to be increased by more than 10%. But if ever we start a new program and we are running short of funds, then how do you make it up? Okay, so that you would do with a new parent who's coming in. But the point there is, with the new parent also, you would say that this is the fee level and it will be only 10% hike for you. Now, grade 1, let's say fees, you paid 1 lakh, PP2, you've gone to grade 1, you will pay 1 lakh 10,000 maximum. But for grade 1, the new admission, we might keep the fee at 1 lakh 15,000. So that's fair enough, right? At least we are being very transparent with the parents that this is the fee we are asking of you. And this is the fee hike which is going to be for the next 10 years. You who's come from the previous years, who's been an old student in the school, they would be at a slightly lesser fee. But then again, you have to see what is the difference between the fee which is being charged from the new students and which is what was charged previously, because then it shouldn't be very huge. A little bit up and down here and there is manageable.
So when we are talking about school fee hike, it's something very funny. I recently heard, I don't want to name the school, but I've recently heard because of a change of the campus, from the child is going from kindergarten to middle school or to high school, whatever change happens, the school fee hikes almost more than 50%, claiming it's for the facilities that the school is providing in the bigger campus. So I want to ask, are the facilities that the school providing really that high? How do you justify to a parent?
Running a school now
Yes, that's why I'm asking, because you're running a school.
See, what I can say is that I would never do that.
Okay.
I would never do that. And there is no need to do that. I'll be very clear on this. But different people give different perspectives. And let me give you an instance of how it happens. I'll again not name the school. When, again, as HSPA, we filed a PIL in the court and we said schools are profiteering, the judge made an interesting comment. He said, everybody says and believes that schools are making a lot of profit. Nobody establishes. Why don't you establish your case? We said the government has already formed a investigation committee. You ask the government to present that report. He said, that I will do, but first you establish the case for yourself. So we were all stuck. I said, what do we do now? And that's when we started an investigative journalism job.
Oh my goodness.
We dug into the balance sheets of a lot of schools. All legal means, nothing illegal, fair means. And HSPA did a press conference. Okay. Interesting case there was a school which has increased the fees by 50 or 100%. That is similar to what you were telling. And the reason they say is that we don't have enough money for paying the salary hikes. You know what the balance sheet said? It had a fixed deposit of 30 crores.
Oh.
It had invested 8 crores in a resort project. It had invested 10 crores in a solar project. It had about 10 odd crores invested in equities. And this we established with audited balance sheets of that very school.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Which is where I had an issue. I said, obviously schools have to be for profit. Otherwise, these kind of investments, nobody's going to sink in, right? But they should not be for profiteering. There has to be reasonable limit and sense on profit. Now, you having about 40, 50 crores lying with you and you telling that, you don't have enough money to pay high salaries for teachers, that's not that. Rest, I would leave it to you and the parents to come to a judgment.
So, but as a parent, I do not get to see. I mean, why isn't the school transparent with me? I'm sure you, as a parent, also must have faced it. I mean, when as a parent, I'm paying so much, I just want the school to be transparent with where, how much. Are they
See,
paying?
it will get into a lot of issues because you're managing any organization, that entire transparency might not be possible. Because then you would have, ultimately it works down to, what you are doing, what others are doing, and others can dip into this information, will lead to a lot of undesirable elements also. And that aspect is also there. So when we were doing this, there's so many people who used to approach us, you give that data to us, you give this to us, we will go and talk to the schools. We never did that because I know they will go to the school and they will ask some money and they'll keep quiet. So some of the respect that we received from the schools, however unwillingly also, was because we never did this. In contrast, I have never said this till now. I can tell this on your podcast. I was approached by a lot of them.
Okay.
Ashish, why are you doing this? What do you want? What nonsense. You think if I wanted something my business will not give me? This is for a much larger cause. I believe in this, that's why I'm doing this.
So things like that happen.
Yeah, they happen. They openly offered.
Okay.
And I said, what nonsense. So you build in a lot of transparency and then these issues will come. And there are a lot of elements like that in each school. We don't want to encourage them either. We did not encourage them that time. He said, no, we're not going to do this. There's so many more instances which I can get, but we never did that. So we got some respect. That level of transparency might be very difficult. But one transparency which should 100% be there is in terms of what fees the school is charging and what is the outlook for the next few years. I'm making a claim that I'll do it for 10 years. I hope now whoever I've made a promise to, I will live up to it. But a lot of people tell me that I'm being very foolish. Okay, and perhaps I will not be able to live up to it. I believe I'll be able to live up to it. But even if not for 10 years, you certainly need to give transparency and clarity to the parents for the next 3 to 5 years. Forget 5 years. Give them clarity for the next 3 years. 3 to 4 years, we will know that, okay, this is what we'll have to budget for. See how easily I use we. Yeah. I still believe I'm a parent and that's how I'll always be.
You're a parent at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it will always be. So, but parents need to have that clarity for the next 3-4 years that this is what we need to budget for our children's education. And there's also a lot of section which comes and says that, why do you need a lakh for nursery? What are you teaching them? But see, the kind of facilities and infrastructure doesn't come cheap, right? So I am an advocate that whichever school, as per whatever facilities they are giving, let them set their own fees. It could be a lakh, it could be many times more than that. But you should be transparent in terms of how your fee is going to be for the next few years. That is critical because let's say there is a school A which is charging about a lakh. There's a school B which is charging about 5 lakhs. Now both are being transparent. And it's for the parent to decide. Nobody's asking you to go to fees which is 1. Nobody's asking you to go to a fees which is 5. Nobody's asking you not to go to a fees which is 50,000 only. You've schools in all the ranges, right? Parents, based on whatever facilities they want for their children, what they think important, they can choose a school. And then they need to have clarity in terms of how the fees is going to be. I used to make this point that by giving the best of the facilities, even at present real estate prices, you should be able to provide a school which will give you all that at around lakh and a half price point.
So now when I'm coming to the government, is there a government regulation act on any of the private schools wherein they come and they check your infrastructure and they check your teacher level and they give you a slab that your fee cannot go beyond certain point? Is there a government?
See, there's a governmental regulation which will do all this audit for the schools, but it is not related to the fees that you can charge.
So it's not related
fees,
to
no fees. It's just given in whatever regulations we have right now, and that's the AP Education Act, and which has been adopted as the Telangana Education Act of 1983 or 87, I think, where it says the government has the authority to regulate fees. That's it. How and the intricacies of it, nothing is mentioned. So we used to take resort to that act, that you've got this authority with you given by the legislature. Why don't you utilize this right to put some kind of a fair regulation on how schools would be charging their fees?
Okay, so not even when in the ground level, like when we are starting, when somebody is starting a school, it's not about the hike, but starting price also.
No, nothing.
Admission fee, we heard few years back that the government said that no school can charge admission fee. But I do not, as a parent, I mean, I've seen
I'm glad you're saying that, because that's something that I dug up and I brought out from the governmental regulation. That shows you the power of truth. But this was related to one-time fees, not in terms of admission fee. That was related to one-time fee that was set. But then subsequent legislations and subsequent court cases, they watered that down. In fact, what Professor Tirupati Rao committee report, which was given out, of which, like I said, I was a member, there the rationale was made out that one-time fees, which is there, it should be there to cover at least one term's fees.
Okay.
So that because there's a lot of default in the schools, and sometimes if there is a default, the school will have a fallback mechanism to go up to at least a term. But then with the wide variation in the fees, so somewhere from 20,000 to about 10 lakhs is what the media tells me.
It is. It is.
Yes. So one term itself would come to about 2-3 lakhs, which will be a lot. So we don't really know what's come out, what's not. But right now, yeah, all watered down. I'll tell you what happened, how people play around with this. So when we started saying, that time there were schools which are charging, I'm telling you 2015-16, schools which are charging 1 lakh as the admission fees then, 10 years before now. And when we started publicizing this regulation that you can't charge more than 5,000, they were suddenly taken aback. And we filed a PIL in the court also. And now it was in the purview of the court as well. So suddenly schools had to cut down their admission fees now, which is a big hit on the revenue, and which is where we became villains for a lot of schools. We as an HSPA there,
yes,
and heroes for a lot of parent community. But schools again did a very sly thing. What they said is, okay, we will not take admission fees. They introduced an annual fee. So they said it is one-time fees, right? So there is no restriction on many time fees. So besides the tuition fee of 3 lakhs, they said every year we'll take 30,000-40,000 extra.
Okay, so every time a parent comes up with something, the school is coming up with a
something
loophole.
else. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So if you're not taking it in one time, you take it in 2 times, the legislation doesn't involve you. Exactly. So which is where what we say is that it is the spirit behind this also which needs to be taken care of, and the spirit behind which needs to be followed, which is what we like to follow at our school.
Okay. So the government has come up with right to education, and it says every school needs to provide certain seats for children who are below poverty or for the children who cannot pay the fee. How much is right to education going to actually get implemented in schools?
See, this act was brought out way back in 2009. And I have written an article in Swaraj Mag, I think one in Beyond News also, you can Google for it, where I have written that it is perhaps one of the worst legislations that the government has ever brought out in the history of independent India.
Oh, okay.
Very strong statement, but I gave solid data and reasons and logic why I make that statement. So you can Google for it, but to give you just one or two insights. One, since this is a lot focused from the parents' perspective, I'll give it out this way. Now, what the Act says is that 25% of students in each private schools, they would have to be from economically weaker sections, and for them, the government will reimburse the fees. But how does this work on ground? Let's say there is a school now which is charging about 5 lakh per annum as a tuition fees, about 1,000 students. If you remove 25% of the students from that and given reservation students there, 250 students into 5 lakhs, whatever is the revenue. Where is it going to come from? The government says it will reimburse. But how much is the government reimbursing? 20,000, 16,000. That too after 2 or 3 years wait. So who's going to foot the subsidy bill for this? You think the school is going to do it? It's the remaining 75% of the parents will have to do it. So which is what I wrote. Who is footing the bill for India's education subsidy? And for whatever reason, all parents association across India, they were going that implement Right to Education Act, implement Right to Education Act. And we as in HSP and Hyderabad, we were telling that, it's a draconian act, don't implement it. And they're like, how can you as a parent association say that you should not implement it? I said, let's have a discussion. And when we had this discussion, we told them this. He said, Array, we didn't know.
Exactly. As a parent, even I didn't know. I mean, nobody has put it down the way you had told it.
So one thing good that the previous Chief Minister KCR did, he said that we are not going to implement this aspect of the act in Telangana. And that's not implemented yet.
Okay.
So thankfully, the parents of Telangana have been saved. If ever that act comes into implementation, be ready to foot fee hikes more than 10, 20, 30, I don't know how many percent it will be, because the government, you are already seeing, has no money to even pay salaries for its staff. It's nowhere going to pay whatever it is supposed to reimburse the schools. Even if it were to have funds to reimburse the schools, it will reimburse only 20,000. Who's going to foot the remaining bill? It's you, the parents, who will have to foot that bill. So be very clear when you support or you go with the media hype or the general activist hype that, it's a very good act which has to be implemented. It is not. That's from the parents' perspective. Then there are other aspects from the school management and general education quality perspective. One was no student can be detained before grade 8 and the horrible effects that it was having on the quality of education that I've documented in that article. And plus, it has several exemptions. Now, interestingly, this act is to be implemented only on the non-minority institutions.
Okay.
So it's not going to be implemented on minority institutions.
Okay.
Okay. So for all the secular aspect that we call, this is such religious discrimination built into the very nature of the act. And what effect it is having on the number of schools being shut down, how it's happening, that also I've documented in that article.
Okay. So can you share a little of that?
So like I said, I had pulled out data on the number of schools which are there in across states prior to the implementation of this act and after the implementation of the act. So not only have the government schools gone down, even the private schools have gone down. Okay, and it's more in the budget segment because that is where they feel the pinch and the heat a lot.
Yes, because the way you have told, it's going to fall on the remaining parents.
Absolutely. So those statistics I've given in that article, you can read it. There are two, one in Swaraj Mag, one in Vio News. You can perhaps just type RTE Naredi and Swaraj Mag. Naredi is my surname.
Okay.
And you should be able to get those articles there.
Okay. Now, when we are talking about curriculum, why is that CBSE or ICSE curriculum priced a little lower than the Cambridge or IB curriculum or Montessori, all the other curriculums? Is that because it's our own Indian board education? Is that the reason?
That will be one of the reasons, but essentially, see, it comes from two things. One, whatever the fees the other boards charge. For instance, CBSE, the exam fees, whatever you charge, it's pretty low. Now, if you look at some of the international boards, I think, I don't know the exact figures, but per subject, per exam, the fees goes up as high as 10,000. So, immediately there will be a difference. Then, in terms of the way the curriculum is designed and the way it is to be taught, the teacher becomes the fulcrum in a lot of this international curricula. And it is absolutely critical to have a great teacher. I wouldn't even say a good teacher. If the teacher is great, then the teaching will be good. I'm still not saying it will be great. It could be great, but you need a brilliant teacher sitting there. And if the teacher is not well equipped, then the curriculum will do a even worse job than any other board or even, let's say, in a CBSE and ICSE. Okay, so the teacher becomes the focal point there. And going back to the question of the availability of quality of teachers, you don't have that many trained and good and available teachers for international curricula today. Let parents not assume that this is in a way very superior and that's why it is there. No, it's not that. But that's an entirely different subject. Maybe we can do another podcast on the differences between CBSE, IB, IGCSE and all. It has a lot of intricacies. That's not solved yet. But yeah, so in a summary, if you look at international curricula like CBSE, you have a given textbook. International curriculum, you will not even have a textbook. So if the teacher is not good, what does she tell the students? Let me give you one instance. Last year, on a Saturday, we suddenly had about 30, 40 walk-ins into a school coming from a nearby school. And I was surprised what's happened that, kids in their uniforms and everything just coming into our school. So when we inquired, the parents told us that the school had introduced international curriculum is of course there, and with that they had introduced project-based learning. Now, how is the entire curriculum to be delivered in a project-based format? Firstly, it's not possible, but that's what people say, and the marketers, they say that it is possible, and schools taken in by those gimmickry, they take it, they subscribe it, they give it to the parents, and that was the results. Perhaps, I don't know what the demonstrations were. Neither the students were clear what was taught, what was learnt, nor the teachers clear what is to be done, what is not to be done. And parents were so fuming that they decided to walk out to a different school. Okay, so it's not to say that the school is bad from where the parents are coming, but just the aspect that when you adopt new methodologies, you need to be very careful in terms of having the necessary equipment and the wherewithal to handle that. And if you don't do that, you could have a big fall. And that's what we saw from that instance. So that's a very real danger of getting into. You don't need to be going with all this hype that, yes, this curriculum is good. It is not. Like I said, that's a different subject. But the pitfalls and dangers are more in those curricula.
So when a parent is paying the additional fee for that curriculum,
Yeah.
I have to pay for the teachers.
Yes.
Because the teachers are putting in the effort.
Yeah, see, those teachers who are trained in that methodology are few and far between. So the salaries are high, the exam fees is high, and various other aspects that takes the fee high, one. And two, there is also aspect that, if we can take a premium on it, let us also take a premium. So that's how everything adds up. It's not that just one factor will add up to that.
Okay.
So it's like, it might be a very crude example, but you have a masala dosha, 50 rupees. You have a butter dosha, add 5 rupees butter, but it will be for 100 rupees.
That's a good example.
Right? So that's how it is. It is expensive, no doubt, but surely not as expensive as it is made out to be.
So recently, TRSMA has proposed the 15% of fee hike, and that was all over the news.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we did not hear anything. You've already told us about it.
Yeah.
But now when the verdict comes, do you think the verdict is going to be for parents or for schools?
See, it's you cannot be certain, but for the information of all the viewers, let me give out the full form of TRSMA also.
Yes,
Telangana Recognized Schools Management Association, and I had a fair bit of interaction with them. Now, what TRSMA represents is, while we say Telangana Recognized Schools Management Association, one thing which the parents also should understand is that even in schools associations, there are multiple associations. So it's not that there's just one association which is representing all the schools.
Oh.
And this I know not because I am a school owner now, but this I know because I was a parent activist and I was interacting with all the school associations.
Okay, so as a parent, I need to know it is not just the Telangana.
TRSMA. Telangana
TRSMA.
TRSMA, that's not the only association. There are several associations.
associations.
TRSMA represents schools or schools which are largely on the budget segment. where the fee levels are pretty low. You could have largely, you could say, state board schools. You could have fees from 15,000, 20,000 per annum.
Okay.
Or you could have some, I don't know what's the upper limit they have, but largely on the budget segment. And then there are multiple. There is one for minorities. There is one, I think, PUSMA or Private Unaided Schools Management. Multiple associations there, and that's a association of so-called elite international schools. We are not a part of any association, at least yet.
Okay.
I don't know whether we will be,
Okay.
but that's how the schools associations are spread. So one thing that the government should also understand, recognize, and the parents should also understand is that one set of regulations for this entire breadth and spectrum of schools might not really be workable. Because if you look at, let's say, TRSMA, let's say a school is charging 20,000 per annum, 15% fee hike for them would be 3,000 rupees per annum. And if they have a really big expense, would 3,000 really be enough for them? It's a question that we need to ask. Now, at the other end, let's look at a school, let's leave the 10 lakh aside, at a 5 lakh spectrum. Already at 5 lakhs, and if you give a 15% fee hike there, it's going to be 75,000. So you also need to look at the quantum of fee hike and not just the percentage. And then, of course, there will be a lot of intricacies involved in this, and which is what TRSMA had been advocating even when we were having this discussion in Professor Tirupati Rao committee. And I think they have a fair point to make.
So, Mr. Ashish, you were a part of Hyderabad Parent Association.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about this? I'm sure lots of parents have no idea about any committee like this even existing in Hyderabad, let alone India.
Like I said, right now I'm running a school. So many might find it interesting that it is me who's going to talk about a parent association. But I've been associated with that association since its inception. So, well, and I'm pretty happy and proud of the work that I did with that association. So I have no qualms about speaking about it. So to give you a context, this association started way back, I think, somewhere in 2007, 2008. And this was in the light of the subprime crisis. I don't know how many of them will remember that. This is way back in 2008 when there was an economic downturn and a lot of the IT sector people were losing their jobs. And which is then a lot of this, the new crop of private schools had opened up, and they were the new craze, and the fees was being increased without any rationale, sometimes to the extent of 30, 50, and somebody told me even 100%. I don't know the exact figures, but in that background, a lot of parents had started protesting. And a lot of my friends were involved. I wasn't actively involved. They used to drag me along.
Okay.
And I was amongst the ones who said, yaar, kuch nahi ho sakta. Nothing will happen. Nothing will happen.
Okay.
But they used to drag me along.
Okay.
And I used to be a silent participant, not doing much at that point of time. But it started out then. And the then Congress government came up with a GO saying that this is the way to regulate fees and this is how they're going to regulate the fees. So that was a big win for the Parents Association.
Okay.
But then the loss was that it went into the courts, and the courts, they passed some judgment. It ended there. The association went into hibernation. The schools continued to do what they were doing without much effect. And then came the phase 2 of this association somewhere in 2015-16. It started with my kids' school. And again, with me not being an active participant at all. People called me up and said, Ashish bhai, you please come. And I said, kuch nahi hota, kyun time waste kar rahe ho? And then what a turn the events would take, and different things happened, and I happened to become the fulcrum of that entire movement. And I said, see, there was this association, and if you really want to do something, you need to revive that association. And that was the phase 2 of that association. So 2015 to 2018 was the active phase where I was really involved. We did a lot of press conferences, a lot of meetings with the government, which is when, the state government came out with a statement that they will regulate the school fees. The government also made a committee, which was called the Professor Tirupati Rao Committee, of which I was coincidentally made the parent representative in that member.
Okay.
What recommendations? We had a lot of meetings, a lot of arguments. In fact, we had a lot of fights also in one of those meetings.
Okay.
But ultimately, I think Professor Tirupati Rao did a fair job. But what report he submitted, that has still not been made public. So that's what this association has done. Right now, there are members who are active in it, but I'm not connected with it. Of course, at a personal level, all of them remain my friends, and people might find it strange, but They still call me, what is the legal position for this? Because I used to work as their de facto legal advisor then. So they still ask me. But yeah, they continue to do what work they do. But after I started the school, I thought it would be only fair on my part to disassociate myself formally from the organization. So I've done that, and right now I'm running a school. But yeah, I firmly believe in the cause that they espouse, and I would support them any day.
So, as a parent,
Yeah.
if I want to look at HSPA, where do I go? I mean, is there any online platform or do we have numbers given
Yeah,
to
see,
us?
HSPA right now, to be very frank, I don't think is very active.
Okay.
Of course, there are members who still trying to do and trying to do their best in terms of what can be done. But yeah, it's quite an active Facebook page, Twitter handles, and last I remember when I was handling the page, we had about 12, 15,000 followers for the page.
Okay.
And any issue cropping up anywhere in any school, HSPA once used to be crawled. Interestingly, last year in my school, a parent had an issue. He called up HSPA and HSPA called me. He said, Ashish, bhai, आपके school से ये issue आया, and we had a great laugh. Of course, that parent issue was different. What we also need to understand here is that, whenever a parent raises the issue, and it's not because I've started a school right now, I used to say that earlier also, it's not necessarily that always the school is at fault. We've seen a lot of parents who would unnecessarily raise a ruckus with the schools, and which is what we used to tell the parents. Let's see, HSPA is not going to enter between a parent and a school's relationship. HSPA, even while I was there, I think they'll continue their policy even as on date.
So, HSPA do not have the right to
See, it's
dictate terms to the school.
absolutely not. What right would any organization have? But because of the aura that HSPA acquired and because of the informal power, because of the activism, schools would listen to it. Not that they would not. But when I revived the organization, the charter that I set for it was very clear that we will not talk to schools. We will talk only to the government. And that's an agenda I'd set. If they've made some changes now, I wouldn't know. But I think that's how it is to be. Because there's no use if you would go and talk to a school because you're not begging to the mercy of a school. You're talking about regulation of the entire school sector. Your issue is not specific related to one school. And if it's related to one school, it's not an HSPA issue. That's what we used to say there. And I'm sure they would be sticking by the same logic right now.
Okay. So, when do a parent get in touch with HSP? I'm just trying to understand because as a parent, I never knew there was something like this existing. So, when as a parent can I approach?
See, you can approach them anytime. But one thing good we did with HSPA was that nobody knew prior to HSPA in terms of what are the actual rules and regulations for running a school. This is for the parents' perspective. From the management side, they obviously would know it. And what are the rights that the parents would have? What is the factual position? That nobody knew. So we studied all these documents and we came out with policy documents, not only for Telangana, but we did a comparative analysis and gave it to the government for rules and regulations followed in Telangana, Delhi, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. I think 4 or 5 states. So that we presented to the then Principal Secretary, Mrs. Ranjiv Acharya, and that got us a lot of traction not only in the media but also in the parent community. For instance, now a school would have raised the fees. There have been instances 20-30%, like you said, some even more. What do you do in that case, right? So that is when a lot of parents come to HSPA, and HSPA says that you can't do anything.
Okay, you actually can't do
You
anything.
can't do anything. See, because the laws presently do not stop a school from raising the fee hike to whatever levels they want to.
So there
That's
is
the
no
factual.
law.
There absolutely no law.
There is a law for the colleges.
For colleges, it's different, and which is what
There is.
HSPA was saying.
But
For
for private
schools, there is not.
schools,
No.
unaided,
Yeah.
there's nothing for the schools.
So each state will have a different regulation for itself. For Hyderabad or Telangana, there is one GO which was passed way back in 1995 and which said that schools cannot make a surplus of more than 5%.
That
Now
is nowhere close to what we parents pay.
exactly. So that is the only regulation which is currently put some kind of a restriction on a school. So now, if a school has raised the fees by 30 odd percent, what do parents do? There is no regulation on the percentage of fee hike. There is a regulation on the surplus that a school can make. So now you have to get that inquiry instituted, and of which what will come out? Nothing much might come out, right? So what do you do in such an instance? You, of course, talk to your own school. You talk to the government that this is how it is, or you change the school. 3 options. Not happy options, but that's the fact. Now, what was happening thanks to HSPA was that because of, if I could use the word, fear of a parent association and fear of negative publicity in the media, schools were self-regulated. And one of the things that Professor Tirupati Rao committee had come out with was that a 10% year-on-year hike should be acceptable both to the parents and to the schools, because you would have inflation to account for, and then salary hikes and various other factors, and school would need some kind of a surplus with them to for bad times. For instance, COVID. What do you do in that? So you would need some kind of a backup fund. So 10% is what he said. And what we'd seen was that while HSPA was active, largely a lot of schools had made that as the benchmark, that we will not violate the 10% rule. So it's not an official rule written in black and white, but you look at the power when the people raise their voices, that it was accepted as an informal rule. Of course, there were instances where schools did increase above it, but they were few and far between from what I know of. If there could be more, but that was an accepted rule. So now, if you look at it from our school side, like I told you, I'm running a school now. Yeah. There we give a blanket guarantee to all the parents that in no year would we increase the fees by more than 10%. Irrespective of there being an official rule by the government or not, it is our own guarantee and our own promise, commitment to the parents that our fee policy is transparent. Because then, when I was an activist, I used to say, give us outlook for at least 3 years so that we'll be able to plan our expenses. You can't be giving us surprises like this year the fee is 1 lakh and next year is 1 lakh 50 and then it's suddenly 2 lakhs. I said there has to be some rationale for it. So quite against those 3 years in our school, it's a firm commitment, and I'm saying this on record in your podcast as well. In no year we will increase our fees by more than 9%. Okay. And not that our base is very high. Oh. We start at a low base. Okay. Nursery, it's just, I think, less than 1 lakh. And for higher classes, I think it will go up to 1 lakh 50. Whether it is 96 or whether it's 1 lakh 50, no year will the fee hike be more than 10%. It's a firm commitment from Indic International School.
Okay. So over these years that you have seen as a parent and as a, the other side of the educator or the one who started his own school, can you tell me something, challenges that you have faced as parent, but you have found the solution when you became the educator?
In terms of the exact problem and solution, not as such, but there's a definite change in perspective and you get to know a lot more. At least when I was a parent, the thinking was that, oh, schools, they must be doing it this way and they would have a perfect science of doing things. And education for me in change of perspectives began very early when I was still planning my school. So if I give you a incident, what happened. So I had an idea of the kind of school that I wanted to call it Indic International School for so and so reasons, following these philosophies. But I was new to it. So I said, let me look at external help professionals or consultants who help set up schools. So I spoke to a lot of people and engaged some of them who are well known and who set up some of the most reputed schools in India. And that's where the education began. And that's where I'll relate back to this project-based learning. So I gave them that this is the conception of the school I want, and I want help in executing this. They said, oh, very good, fantastic, brilliant idea. And when they come up to me, a presentation has nothing of what I told them. And they gave me a completely different thing, that this is what the philosophy should be, this is what the branding should be, this is how the school should be. I said, hello, is this meant for me or is it meant for somebody else? They said, no, it's meant for you. He said, no, Ashish, project-based learning is the latest thing. Experiential learning is the latest thing. You should market yourself as project-based learning. I said, acha, I will do that. First, convince me what it is and how is this better than anything else that we're doing. So he'll give you one success story, that one school in Ahmedabad did this, and this is how they got international recognition. I said, fantastic. How do you cover it with that same methodology, the entire curriculum that the board gives? He said, oh, that can easily be done. I said, show me. He said, oh, we'll have to talk to the school. I said, oh, then take me to the schools. He said, no, why will they talk? I said, boss, this is not going to work. So, and when I saw that incident of parents flocking to me, I immediately recollected incident, what happened with the consultant. I said, how can you deliver the entire curriculum in a project-based format? It's all glamorous to look at. The parents will be done in with it if you present the way they do it, right? Now, that's the thing where the schools have to exercise their jurisdiction, which is what we do. I said, so there's certain aspects or subjects of the curriculum, certain aspects of the subjects, which you can do it in a project-based format, do it in a project-based way. There's certain aspects which have to be done in an experiential-based format, some to be done in an inquiry-based format. So it is not the school which will determine what methodology the school will use, but it is the subject which is being taught which will demand what methodology is apt for it.
Okay.
So I can't be tied up that I'm a project-based learning school, I'm an experiential school, I am this school, I'm that school. I am a subject-based school, I am a need-based school. Where what is needed, we will do that. So we have elements of project-based learning, we have elements of experiential learning, we have elements of this. And then another aspect I realize is, the kind of beautiful marketing pitches that they give. When a school says, I'm not going to obviously name the school or not even going to use the taglines. I don't want to offend anyone. This is a general industry practice. Let's say somebody says, we are redefining education, we are redefining excellence. Usko redefining का मतलब भी नहीं पता होगा. When I started off, I started with a basic question. What is the definition of education? Everybody give a blank face. Definition, we'll see. Anyway, keeping that aside, what I was trying to highlight is that the hollowness of a lot of the marketing spiels of the schools. One school with a broken roof also will call itself international school. And I was reading and it says, we are redefining education. So every school is using the same terminology and it's not coming from the conviction of the management. It is coming from the keyboard of a marketer sitting somewhere who thinks what will work with the parents. So my first learning was that you are entering into this area. Now be very clear and careful that what blueprint you have for yourself in your mind, you don't dilute that to the demands of marketing in a school. Okay, so if I can give one more instance, in the blueprint that I had, I was very clear for different reasons. We can discuss that later. That Sanskrit is going to be a compulsory subject in our school from nursery till grade 8. Okay, so we're teaching 4 languages to kids in our school: English as the medium, Hindi or Telugu as the second and third language, and Sanskrit as the 4th language is there from the school. And every consultant I spoke to, they said, sir, this will not work. Who on earth learns Sanskrit right now? Why do you need Sanskrit? And they might attribute religious motives to you. I said, let them attribute whatever they want. I am sitting in the school. I will explain the reasons to the parents. I will tell them why it is so. And in a year or two, they will see the benefits. Nobody agreed. I stuck to my guns. And today, if you take feedback from our parents, it is the USP of Indic. Everybody loves Sanskrit. And we have so many parents who are coming to our school because Sanskrit is a compulsory subject in your school. We want to put our children in your school. So, to give you the gist of what you ask, a lot of what is put out there in media, social media, it's not true. It doesn't come from the conviction of a school or a school's management. That's something that will not be true for all. But like I gave you the instances, it will be true for a lot of schools. There are many schools who I know who stick with their conviction and their philosophy. And yeah, you should be on the lookout for such schools.
Right. I want to know why as a parent, we are so different from other countries. Other countries, government schools are almost at par with their private schools. But wherein in India, even a normal lower middle class family would not want to send their child to a government school because of the infrastructure, the teachers, the facilities. Why do you think that is not in our country? Is there any reason?
There are multiple reasons, but let me give a bit of a longish answer. Let me take you a little back in history as well. A popular misconception with us all is that the present K-12 education or 10+2 education system, it was come from the West. And if you Google also, you will find the name of Horace Mann, who was an educator in US, who brought it and who took it from Germany and brought it to India. And the other misconception is that the schooling in India was limited to the Gurukul system. It is not a fact. We had 10+2 years of education in India. We had universities in India. And I made a small video which is there on our school website. You should take a look at that video. Or you should read this book called The Beautiful Tree by Dharampal. He gives out statistics of how many schools India had when the British came in the early 1800s, the 19th century, and you will be shocked by the statistics. Almost every village in India had a school. And at the same point of time in UK, entire UK put together had no more than 50,000 school-going children. Now, the interesting point to answer your question, how are these schools being funded? These schools were being funded by the community. The tax that was levied on the people, everything was first collected in the community, let's say in a Gram Panchayat. From there, first it went to the school. Okay. Then whatever remained, a part of it went to the government as Lagan. That entire system was waylaid and it went to the government. Now, the second aspect of why it went to the government, it went out, if you see the actual documents, not because it was a welfare state, not because the government wanted to do good for its citizens. Okay, I'm making a very conscious and a strong statement there. They did it because they wanted to have a stranglehold on what the people think. They said, explicitly written, that it is the best antidote to revolution. It is the best antidote to people going against the emperor or going against the government. Okay, so which is why the government likes to have a very tight stranglehold on their curriculum, right? So it comes from there that the governments there, they made it as a priority so that they could control what the people think. Now, even if we do not make it a priority in India, also still the syllabus is controlled by them. But coming to the question of why this difference, right? So all the schools that were there earlier in India, they were just shunned away because the medium of instruction there was Hindi, Urdu, Sanskrit and all. That was done, and English was recognized, and that's how India became uneducated and Britain became educated. And governments in Western countries, they deliberately started focusing on education and they built up schools. Now, India, when we gained independence, we hardly had any resources. And if the government were to take up the onus of schooling, right, then it would surely not be possible. You need private sector participation, which is where, if you go back a few years, community was still taking up the onus. So you have so many schools where the community got together, they funded schools, they formed education societies, and still running brilliant schools with much lesser fees. What is that happening now? When was the last time you heard that a community got together and said that for our community and for the larger society as such, let us pool in money and start a school and manage it on our own. So then we will keep the fees also low and quality of education also high. Community stopped doing that. And the government, having no funds, it stopped doing that. What do? You have to rely on private sector. And if private sector has to come in, profit has to come in. And then you say, no, you can't make profit, which is where this entire loop is going haywire. So if you want a realistic answer for a larger perspective, government will never be able to do it. And we are seeing the condition of the government, no matter which government comes. My firm belief is that they will never be able to do it. One, private sector has to do it. And in private sector, somehow I don't know why that entire community initiatives of people getting together and starting schools with a service motive, why that is no longer happening. I've been speaking to a lot of people that why don't you do it? You have so many resources put in together. So who will manage the school? In fact, my journey, that's one of the initiatives that I was trying to do. I didn't want to start a school directly. I said, you start. If you want professional management, I will manage it. I said, you have never managed a school. What will you manage? So I said, okay, to build my credibility, I have to start a school. That's also one of the genesis for why I ended up starting a school. But yeah, the government will never be able to do it, no matter what. That's just the nature of the beast that is the government. Private sector participation has to be there. One thing, I think nobody talks about it, but I would like to plead and tell a lot of people that your communities, pull in money, start your own schools. What's stopping you? The amount of fees that you're paying out in private schools, half of it you give it to a society, make a society, start your own school. Professional management, you'll get enough. Or from this platform, I'm telling it to you, I will manage it. You start a school, put a fixed management fee for that. We will run the school with the same quality, same resources. And then your fee problem also gets solved, because our intention of getting in here is not profit. Our intention is to be able to make the difference to the society for the power of that education gives you. The difference that you can make to the lives of the students. Let's do that. But people have their own choices.
Right. So, Mr. Ashish, on an average, what percentage of the fee paid by the parent goes to the teachers as the salary? I mean, let's say I've paid 100 rupees.
Yeah.
What
There
percentage of
cannot
that?
be a ballpark figure for this, because it depends from school to school, depends on fees to fees. Now, let's say the teachers' salaries are around 40,000 on an average. You have 100 teachers, right? 40,000 into 100, it comes to about 40 lakhs. Now, 40 lakh and your fee collection is, let's assume, 1 crore, depending on the fees that you have. So, on a 1 crore fee collection, it will come to 40%. If your fee is 5 crore, then it comes to hardly 20%. So there cannot be a percentage that you give out. It will be very different for each school. It will be very different from city to city, from place to place. Even within the city, it will be very different. So whether it is rents or whether it is salaries, and that's one of the grounds which the schools always had. There's, like I told you, GOMS1, which gives a very watertight percentage, that it says that 50% should go to salaries, 15% should go to rents. That's never going to be possible. How is it going to be possible? Let's say one school which is there in the bang of high-tech city and one school which is there on the outskirts, the rents are going to be vastly different. You can't do that. And in the deliberations of Professor Tirupati Rao committee, and I had no intentions of starting a school then, but schools is surprised when I supported their stand. I said, see, what they're saying is a fact, because you cannot have a watertight definition. And if you do it to show compliance, then schools will unnecessarily have to indulge in practices which might not be advisable. So why have such regulations? What you can have is a basic overall regulation in terms of whatever profit percentage you think is reasonable, like GOMS1 says 5%. Some of the High Court and Supreme Court judgments give 15%. Somebody might like to have another view. That's up to you. But overall regulation of it is fine. But if you get to the minute that this is what you should pay on salary, how will you do? And interesting tidbit I'll give you. The government had formed a investigation committee when we from HSPA were protesting. 10 schools were identified and audit was done. So I saw the notices issued to one school that you are to give 50% of your fee as salary. You are giving 55%, which is a violation. I said, come on, they're paying both to the teachers. What's your problem? Right. And that's an issue with watertight percentages that you give. That's never going to work, and that's not going to stand legal scrutiny.
Okay. So now seeing that, looking at the teachers' demand when today's schools cropping up with so many schools available with different curriculums around,
Yeah.
is the teacher community able to come up, meet the demand that we have for teachers? Is that happening?
Meet the demand in terms of you're asking for the number of teachers?
Yes, number of teachers first.
See, there is a definite scope for improvement in the quality of teachers which schools get. We are also on the constant lookout, and I believe this is a challenge across the schools. While there are enough numbers available, a lot of teachers out there, but in terms of the standards that one would really expect, I think there is definite scope for improvement there.
And when it comes to their salaries,
Yeah.
Of course, you said we cannot put a cap on their salaries, but there is no hike or there's no, improvement or promotions like that of other sectors that they get. What is going to push people to get into the teaching profession?
See, different people, of course, will have their different motivations, but all said and done, pay packages need to improve. There is no two ways about it. But that alone cannot be the criterion, right? A lot of them are also there in it for passion, which is good. And I think it's on the school's part that wherever you identify good teachers, passionate teachers, teachers offering that kind of teaching experience and quality, then I think the school should take up the onus of identifying, nurturing, and promoting them in terms of doing all that is required to retain them and keep them with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.